Okay, so what we're looking at today is that Donald Trump has put orders into effect so your information from hospitals about the coronavirus is no longer going to be reported directly to the CDC. It's going to be reported to the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, basically so the federal government can get its hands on it, right? And this is causing a lot of concern because people are concerned that possibly Trump is going to want to change the numbers. Now, this is a completely reasonable fear to have, and I think it's entirely likely that this could occur because we've heard Trump for a long time now saying things like, well, we need the numbers to go down. We need there to be less testing so that the numbers go down. All this kind of stuff. Trump basically has three problems going into November. One, he's Trump, right? So we can just throw all the weird stories about Trump. We'll just throw that into the it's Trump category, right? But then we've got the economy, which is not doing very good. And then we've got the pandemic, which is not going very well at all. So all three of these things are big strikes against the president and will probably lead to him not being reelected in November. So he's trying to do whatever he can, right? And this is a move that affects two of those things. He wants to get people back to work. He wants to get people back in the schools so that the people can get back to work, hopefully to get a little bit of a boost in the economy. And it doesn't matter if we lose a small percentage of humans to the pandemic. That's a sacrifice he is more than willing to make. Okay, so what's the situation we have right now? So the person that's in charge of Health and Human Services has no background in the science of the kind of stuff that he's in charge of, the pandemic type situations, right? So it's the same thing we've seen with the Department of Education, with the Department of Energy, with shutdowns to the federal government, with firing people of these different agencies and firing IGs. Basically, Trump's firing everyone, right? And what did we expect? That was his line that he would give when he was a reality TV star is you're fired. So it's not surprising that he just fires everybody all the time. But this brings in the best case scenario, which is also a disaster, right? So we've talked about how people are afraid that Trump and his group of bandits are all going to try to cook the books here. Well, we've seen that there are already a number of states who have been caught cooking the books about their numbers. This is probably going to make that a lot easier for people who want to change the way things are being reported. We can just change the numbers. So that's people's big fear. Totally reasonable, probably going to happen. But let's talk about the best case scenario is that the Trump and his cronies don't try to cook the books. The numbers that come in just get reported. That's not really a good situation either because what they're claiming is that they've come up with a newer, better system for people to be turning in the data. Now, that's highly unlikely considering this is a very complex system, right? We're talking about thousands of hospitals all over the country that are supposed to report in a certain amount of data in a certain way. And then the people on the CDC side, they are trained experts who have been doing this for years to interpret that data. If it looks like there's mistakes, numbers that don't add up, they can get back to the hospitals and say, these numbers look like maybe something was entered incorrectly. Can we get that fixed? So it's a whole complex system, but people have been doing it. And if you've ever been involved in a system like that then changes over, it's probably not going to go well at first because it's a whole new system and people have to learn the whole new system. They find all the new errors and they find all the problems that the new system has, but it takes a while to find those. So the best case scenario that we can expect is that the numbers are still going to be underreported for a period of time while people are learning the new system. So what you might ask is, well, maybe it makes sense that we fire up the new system while we still keep the old system running so that they're both running at the same time. And then the new system, we can work out all the mistakes. And then at some point, we'll move all the numbers over from the CDC to the federal government. No, that would make too much sense, right? That's what you would do if you were actually trying to run a legitimate pandemic response. If all you're trying to do is get the numbers to drop because it looks good for your election, then you just cause a big change, right? This is what we've seen in a Trump presidency, which is to disrupt everything that's going on. You disrupt regulations, you disrupt environmental reforms, you disrupt schools, you disrupt all this stuff and just put everything into a level of chaos and nothing works right. So the CDC is basically full of trained scientists and people who are trained at their job. Trying to ramp up a whole new system in the middle of the pandemic makes no sense, because then when you see changes in numbers, you don't really know, are these changes in numbers because we were moving to a new system and it didn't quite some hospitals maybe are not going to be able to submit their data correctly because they're going to have to learn the new system. There's going to be mistakes and errors. So are those new errors because of the system, or is it that the numbers really dropped? Because things aren't going to get over-reported. What's going to happen is certain hospitals are not going to check in or not get their full check-in with their numbers because they haven't learned the new system and mistakes get made. That's what's going to happen. So no matter what, we're going to see a drop in the numbers. Well, a drop in the numbers would be good if it accurately reflected society. But what we don't want is numbers going down and then being justified to put people back at work and put people in dangerous situations when the real numbers are much higher. No, I'm sorry, no matter how you look at this, there's no way to justify that this is on the level. I mean, it just straight up looks corrupt. And as we've seen in the last few years, at least with this presidency, if it looks corrupt, it probably is corrupt. So the problem is, going forward, there's a shadow cast on the numbers, right? Which Trump doesn't care, right? He goes out, he says what he wants, he tells his people to believe it, and they do. But for the rest of the world that sort of would like to rely on facts during a time of the pandemic, it's a little bit harder because we're not going to know. Are these the real numbers? Are these numbers low because of errors? Are these numbers low because the president just decided to change them and told his sycophants to change the numbers for him? We won't really know. And studies show that there's a majority of us in the U.S. who don't really trust the way the Trump administration is handling the pandemic. So it's unfortunate that we're probably never going to have trustworthy numbers, right? Trump has already accused China, and other people have accused China of them basically cooking their own books, and it looks like we're doing it here in the U.S., right? So there are very few numbers about this that we're going to be able to trust going forward. Two of the biggest, most powerful countries on the planet, people are going to have a hard time trusting about their numbers. That's not going to help people live. All right, thanks for checking out the video. Make sure to hit subscribe so you can catch all the new content as it becomes available. I will be live streaming 6 o'clock on Saturdays, a little bit more lighthearted, try to have a little bit fun, look at stories that are maybe not quite as serious. Some will be serious, but some of them are just kind of the silly stuff that doesn't deserve a whole episode of its own. So go ahead, tune in Saturday at 6 p.m. Hope you can join us.